tutorial. Today's one is for how to deboss your dies into your cardstock, either to create backgrounds or to create focal images. Mostly this tutorial is if you're using a Tangerine and 300 GSM white card, because every time you change from a different type of cardstock, or if you're using a different machine, obviously it's going to be a different combination of sandwiches. So specifically, I'm using the Tonic Tangerine die cutting machine and 300 GSM white cardstock. And then this tutorial is actually in conjunction with Tonic Showcase number 36, which is the ribbon and key gift box, which creates this fantastic little gift box like this that you probably would have seen in my up close video yesterday. And it has this cool mechanism where this inside tray actually raises up with ribbons as you open the box, and you can push it back down and then close the box up and you put the key back inside to hold it together. And it's just a really cool design, and you can also put the key in the slot when the box comes up as well. But I'm doing this tutorial in conjunction with that die set because there are some beautiful decorative panels in here that I thought would work really nicely for this kind of technique. So with playing around, my usual sandwich that I always use when I'm debossing my dies is this one, which is the white plate, the green plate, and then the green squishy mat. But it does give a very deep emboss, and some people might not like that. You might not like the way the card has cracked a little bit. You might not like the way part of this is actually like die cut all the way through. So an alternative you can do is the white plate, the green plate, but a piece of Greyboard instead of the actual green squishy mat, and then it just gives more of like an impression into the cardstock as well. So there's two different ways of doing it, and obviously each different way gives a different result on the back as well. If you'd rather use the back of the card, maybe you want it to be sticking upwards rather than be indented downwards, you can definitely use the front or the back. So those are kind of like the two depths that I've been playing with for my cards that I wanted to show you. And initially I wanted to show you first this one. So this is the white plate, the green plate, and the green squishy mat to give that really deep impression. But I mean, that kind of looks a little bit awful, doesn't it? The way it's like some bits are cut through, it's like got cracks in some areas, and that whole side is almost cut through. But if you come back in with your alcohol pens and you add colour to those areas, okay, it still looks like a mess at the moment, but if you come back in with another die cut, because you have the outside edge to cut out that pattern to die as well, and then you put that on the top of it, doesn't that look fantastic? And the fact that we embossed it first, it gives what they call this quilted kind of look. So it kind of like makes the cardstock look as if it's poking up through those die cut apertures without having to do all of the paper piecing, and it makes it really easy for a very intricate design for you to be able to have a coloured patterned kind of version of it, but without having to place all of those individual tiny little pieces to get that pattern. And then you're also getting that slightly raised kind of impression in there as well. And the difference that just colouring it or adding the die cut back over the top, you know, is really dramatic, that difference between the two. And in the past I have also done this and coloured the outline as well. So for example, this central section, you'd colour that brown, you'd colour around the petals all yellow, you'd colour these bits in the green for the vines, and then you could actually leave the background pattern white so that it stands out really nicely. But you can definitely colour the detailed piece to go on top of it as well. So that's kind of like my basic way that I normally use this quilted kind of technique. Or it looks really good with mirror card as well. If you're doing your boxes that have got beautiful patterns, I know this is a box with beautiful patterns, but any of the kind of boxes that you have from Tonic, sometimes it's nice to do this quilted kind of effect with mirror card showing through your detailed patterned panel. So because we're then switching cardstock again, you're going to want to think about your sandwich, and if you needed to like add a bit more thickness, take a bit of thickness away. So I would think for mirror card the green mat is probably going to be too thick, but you could try with like Greyboard and maybe a couple of shims of printer paper, or you know, instead of Greyboard, a couple of sheets of 300 GSM cardstock to make it slightly less thick or something. So you can definitely play around with the sandwich to get the results that you want for your cards, but these are the ones that I have been doing, so I wanted to show you those. So that is one way of doing it, where you can actually take the detailed pattern and put it back over the top, and you can do this by colouring that background piece or using a specialty cardstock as well. It looks really lovely with a specialty cardstock underneath there too. But then the three that I've already finished, I was using the other panel, so this beautiful swirly panel that's in the ribbon and key gift box. I created these 3 cards here. So the first one over here is using the green matte to get a really deep impression of that. And you can see when I put Nuvo Mousses over the top, you can really still see that white pattern of where the dye really pushed into the cardstock. So that gives a really deep kind of impression. Almost looks like you've used texture paste through a stencil or something as well. It kind of gives that kind of a look to your project. And in the case of this card, and well, only in the case of one sentiment really, have I put the die cut actually back over the top of it for these cards. So you don't have to put the die cut back over the top. You can just use it as a decorative debossed element into your card as well. You definitely don't have to put the other intricate die cut back over the top to hide anything, but you can if you want to, which is the lovely thing about it. And then on this one as well, I've used that beautiful frame that's actually the top of that gift box, and I've actually just used some Nuvo mousse on that as well. So bear that in mind when you're doing your gift boxes as well. If you want to bring in your Nuvo products, you can actually, you know, get a really deep deboss impression on that sort of outer frame piece, and you can use your mousse on that as well. And saying that, I want to try debossing that die into a card panel, so we'll try that later as well. But this is the first one that I've done. All of the products I have used, I was actually using expanding mousses, because you can use expanding mousse in the same way as a normal mousse, and these ones just happen to be on the top of my container, and I really liked that colour combination. So I went with iced aqua, mustard seed, Bramley apple, and cactus green. So those were the 4 colours of mousses that I decided to use for this. And then the Nuvo Drops is the gorgeous copper penny. Really, really beautiful copper colour. Goes really nicely with that mustard seedy kind of colour as well. So that was the first one, using the deep impression to get that kind of effect. Oh, and the sentiment I finished off with is this sentiment. I've used them quite a few times recently, so you've probably seen me show these already, but the Simply Sentiments die set. So that's that one. Then this one is the exact same die in the exact same position, but using the Greyboard instead of the green matte, and you can see it's a much subtler. I've put some tulle over the top of it, that's why you can see that grid pattern, but it's a much subtler impression. If I hold them both next to each other, you can see how this is really like deep and pillowy, and this one is literally just like the outline etched into it. Almost looks a bit more like hot foiling, or if you had hot foiled with this die, it would give more of an impression like this, just those sort of outlines of the cutting edge of the die, whereas this gives a really pillowy, luxurious kind of look. Doing less pressure just gives a subtle pattern in the background, which takes the mousse in a different way. This one really left the white outlines around the details, but this one, in some areas, it actually deepens the edges, because more of the mousse kind of gets stuck into those little, you know, pressed in little areas. And I wanted to also show the difference between covering your panel with your mousses, or just being really messy and artsy and leaving it really loose and wacky around the edges. And I think both of them give a really lovely effect. I'd say this one is probably more my style, because I do like having the white space on my cards, but they both give a really lovely effect. And obviously I've gone for a little bit more vintagey kind of colours for these, but you can pick out any colours that you want to do this kind of technique with. You can just stick to one colour as well if you want. And then I also wanted to try the same idea with the Greyboard, so a lesser of a debossed or embossed kind of impression in there, but I wanted to try with the sentiment and also with some of the side panels. You got these sort of funny shaped side panels, so I've just put a couple of them in different directions, and you know, added another one on to make this sort of like double strip sort of section in the centre, and I also did the debossing with that for a Me to You die there as well. And you can see again it's a very subtle kind of effect, but it gives that little bit of detail in the background. If you don't want to stamp or you don't want to stencil, it just gives a little bit of detail. And I did this before I put the mousse on, but I think you probably could do it after you've put the mousse on and get a different kind of effect as well, so you could definitely play around with that too, but I personally did it before I put the mousse on. And in this case I was actually applying the mousse with a mini ink blending tool. That's why there's some circles here. I just sort of squished off and twisted the leftover mousse that I had on my sponge to get those kind of effects. And then to go over the top of this one, I die cut the From Me to You, and then I just tore a circle around the edge and then placed that back over the top. And you can see it gives a slightly quilted kind of effect. You can tell that that's not just stuck directly onto the cardstock. You can tell that I've done something else to it, and that is just the debossing it first, and then placing the other die cut over the top. But if you look at the sunflower one, where I was recessing or putting the die cut back over the top, you can see the difference in effect that gives. This gives a much more of like a puffy effect coming through there, whereas this one is much flatter, but you can still tell that something has happened on there. So those are the 3 cards that I have already done. And then I wanted to show you a debossing of, you know, one of each of the kind of methods, one with the green mat and one with a piece of Greyboard, to show you the differences. And when you do it with the green mat, you will hear that kind of like a crunching sort of noise going through it as all of the cardstock is like pushed up through the details in the die. So for that one, I think I want to go with this circle. I don't know if, actually maybe I'll go for the lesser pressure one with this circle, because I don't know if because it's got that cut line all the way around the edge, I don't know if it'll just make it fall out, but I want to give it a go. And there's also this debossing love die in here as well, and I wanted to give that a go, so I'm just gonna eyeball which way round that goes and try and get it upright. And then I am going to use a little bit of tape. Usually when you're debossing dies, you don't always want to use that much tape, because it can leave an impression in your cardstock or really get debossed into it. So I'm kind of going to try and not overlap onto the cardstock too much, but I just want to be able to hold those dies slightly in place. So that's going to be the lesser pressure one, I think, unless it doesn't look very good, and then we will go on to the more pressure one. And then for the other one, I really did like this flourishy design, so maybe I will just show you the flourishy design, but when I add mousse I'll work on the sunflower one so you can see the difference between them. But I'll add this flourishy design again to this one, and depending how this one works, this will either be a deeper version or a shallower version, depending on what sandwich we use, but I want to show you both of them, you see, and I'm not sure how well the other one is going to work because I haven't tried that yet. So let's move these out of the way, let's move the dies out of the way and bring my tangerine in. So I've got my plates that that my dad cut in half for me, and I have also now cut a tan mat in half so that I've got an actual green mat to show you, because usually I use the tan mat that came with my Spellbinders Junior plates, but I do actually have a green mat now to show you. So we don't need the cutting plate for this because we're using the white plate and the green plate. And then I am going to use a piece of Greyboard as my impression piece for this one. So we're going to see how well this works, and if it doesn't work with the lesser pressure, then I will move on to the green squidgy mat and we'll see how that comes out. But I really want to give this a go. I'm really interested to see how this comes out, and because we're going lesser pressure, we're not really going to hear anything going through the machine. It almost feels like nothing's happened, like you don't even feel like you've made an impression. So, okay, so we have got a bit of an impression there, but because of that cut line, it's a very subtle impression for the pattern, and again, very subtle impression for that. So I'm actually going to put that back into position, and we're going to try going through with the green squidgy mat. Now then, if this doesn't work and it just completely cuts through the square and the circle, you'll know that that won't work for this kind of technique, but it's good for me to show you. And actually that didn't make much of a noise. I guess it's because there's no detail in the die for it to squish through. But let's see what's happened. Oh, I think it stayed intact. Oh, that's brilliant. Look at that. That worked really nicely. Oh, I'm so glad I tried that in the end. I know it has done this sort of buckling effect here. I don't really mind that too much. If you did really mind that, you could just cut this into a square and then mount this onto another piece of white cardstock. So there's definitely ways of getting around it, or if your die has moved and it's not quite in the central position that you wanted it to be in as well. Also, I feel like if you had a circle nesting die, you could actually have put that in there as well to fill in some of that extra gap, or we can you know, put some Nuvo drops around there as well. We could go around there in a circular manner with some Nuvo drops. That would look really lovely too. So that one is on the thickest setting then, and then you can see on the back how that's really pressed into it. It looks really lovely on the back as well, actually. But yeah, it presses through really, really well on the green mat, and I'm really pleased that that didn't cut through. Because this has got the cutting edge all the way around the edge and the circle, I just presumed that it would probably cut through with that amount of pressure on it, but it hasn't. So that is a very good tip to know. So then this one will go through with the lesser pressure then to show you how this one kind of works. So we've got our piece of Greyboard there, and there's muck on this, but we can add mousse over the top of it, so that's no problem. So we can put that on there, and then take our white cutting plate, put that over the top, and then run that through as well. And then you can see how that beautiful pattern has just transferred onto there. Really subtle kind of pattern. And you can kind of tell the difference between that depth. I mean, the cutting edge is the outside edge and that inside edge on this one. The rest are debossing on those. And the cutting edge on this one is obviously around all of that detail. So you can see the difference between the depths in those two areas. So really impressed with those that circle one. I'm very pleased that we tried that. So I'm just going to move all of this out the way, and then I'll come back in a second. Okay, so now I've got all of these versions to kind of show you. I have already made that card colouring this one, so I won't do that one. And I have already made a card putting the mousses over the top of the shallow impression of this swirly one. So I will just show you with these two, adding some mousse on top of them. And we'll bring out some of our Nuvo Expanding Mousses, but it can be a crackle mousse, it can be a chalk mousse, it can be a normal embellishment mousse. It doesn't have to be expanding mousse, and it doesn't just have to be embellishment mousse. You can play around with whatever mousses that you want to, because they all basically have the same properties, except for when they're expanding or chalk or crackle, they have that extra property in them that, you know, makes them do what their name suggests that they do. So let's just get a little bit of each of these out. This one is my newest one, I think, because it's very nice and juicy still. The other ones are a little bit dry, but as you saw on my cards I've already made, they still work perfectly. Even though they're a little bit dry, we can just add a little bit of water to them and reconstitute them and easily use them again. You can see that one is quite crusty, but we can easily add some water to it, smush it with our palette knife, and easily get that back to life again. So if you've got any mousses that are a little bit crumbly looking, do still use them, because you can still make use of them. So we'll just get a little chunk of that out as well, and I'll move any crumbs that I've got on here, and then we'll just get a little bit of water on each of these. I put less on this one because it's already quite juicy. And then we can just squish it into the water with our palette knife, and you can see how easily that's just coming back into a lovely consistency. I am making them a little bit more watery than a mousse would be, just so they go a little bit further, you know, as we're putting them on. But you can definitely just put one squirt of water on and just get it back to the normal Nuvo mousse consistency as well. You don't have to put extra water on to make them a little bit more liquidy. So we've got that one. And then the blue one. They're such pretty colours. And I love that you can just use your expanding mousses just like a normal embellishment mousse as well, because sometimes you might have only invested in certain colours in a specific type of mousse, but you can still do those techniques, just the basic techniques with a mousse, with any of your colours across any of the ranges, which is lovely. So we've got our mousses ready, and then we've got our two pieces ready. Let's go with this one first, which is the one with the love and the frame around it. And before, I just came in with my finger, picked up one of the colours, and then just started adding it over the top. And depending how much you add, you'll get different amounts of the colour, different amounts of it picking up on the different areas that you've got on there as well. Sometimes it'll go into the cracks, sometimes it'll just stay in the top piece. It doesn't really matter how you add this, and you can definitely experiment with different ways of adding the mousse as well. Like I said in one of my other cards, I used a Nuvo ink blending tool to add it on there as well. I wouldn't recommend the brushes. You could use like a stiff bristled brush, but I wouldn't recommend one of their gorgeous precision ink blending brushes, because I feel like it would gum up the bristles too much. But yeah, any of your like sponges or little foam pieces that you have, you can definitely use to apply this if you don't want to use your fingers as well. So just add some more of that gorgeous blue. And I'm going to do the messy effect around the edge, which is literally where I just take a little bit more of each of the colours and deliberately go outside of that main square, just bringing in some random sort of like artsy, swooshy kind of motions just with my finger. Hopefully you can kind of see that. I don't want to, I've put those mousses a bit too close to zoom in too far, but hopefully you can kind of see the kind of effect I'm going for. And you can just keep building up as much as you want, you know, like layering up the colours. You could just stick to the one colour, as I said before. Whatever you think looks good and however you want to do it, you can use this technique. And obviously you can just do this into coloured cardstock if you want to as well. You don't have to do it in white cardstock and then add a medium over the top of it. You could definitely just do it into a piece of cardstock and then that is your card front as well. You don't have to go with all of the Nuvo products, but I just personally love my Nuvo products, so any excuse to use them. So we've got our like greeny blue messy kind of background on there. Then I'm just going to come in with some of the coppery mustard seed colour and just try to be really light-handed with this. So I literally just want to try and pick some of the detail up without getting into the debossed areas. I just want to touch that topper or the top bit of the detail. Hopefully we can kind of manage that. I also like splattering on some of the copper as well, because the copper is kind of like your accent colour with this colour combination, and it's quite nice to have a little bit of that splattered as well. Then we're going to go really lightly over the love section too. A little bit more in the middle. Okay, and then we've got that beautiful kind of result, and once this is dried we can like buff that with a bit of kitchen roll to get a really high shine kind of look on the mousse as well. And if you feel like you're not quite keen on how it's come out, you can just go back in and add a little bit more as well. Like I feel like maybe you want to deepen up that beautiful blue that's in there. We can just add a little bit more of that gorgeous blue. That looks good. And we don't have to keep this like this, we can cut it out as well and put it on another piece of white card as well. I might show you how to do that too, in case you're sort of wondering how you would go about doing that. So that's that one. And then for the sunflower one, we could go a bit differently for the sunflower one. I'm just going to get a baby wipe so that I can start with a clean finger so I'm not contaminating the colours. So we could go for green for those foliage areas. So we definitely know this bit here is foliage, and coming around there slightly, and then this area as well, and a tiny bit around here. And then we could add a little bit of the darker green in there as well. Now because I have made this a little bit more liquidy, where if I add a bigger blob of it, it's going to sink into those details. So definitely adjust your consistency of your mousse to whatever kind of results that you want to get, really. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of that dark colour there. Then I think I'm just going to go with the bronze all over the sunflower. So even though mostly just the centre of the sunflower would be a bronzy colour, I haven't got a yellow in my colour combination of mousses for the cards that I'm doing, so I will just add copper to that section, and then I'll go in with another clean finger and add blue to the background here. So in this case we're keeping our colours discreet, whereas in the previous version I was actually mixing all of the colours together to give a gorgeous mixed kind of effect. But on this card we're keeping all of the colours separate as well, and I've still got that piece that I haven't stuck down yet on that previous sunflower card. So if you wanted to, you could definitely put your die cut back over the top to neaten that up. And I like that artsy edge poking out the edge of it as well, it gives a really nice look. So you can do whatever you like to with this kind of a technique. And then saying about the splashes as well, we can actually bring in some of our mousses and add a little bit of splatter onto here. I mean, because I've already been watering these down, we haven't got to water them down that much more to get them a nice consistency for splatter. And we can just get a small little paintbrush and mix up that beautiful mustard seed colour, and then just add a bit of splatter across the card. You can do it with all of the colours, you can just pick the one accent colour to do it with. whatever you prefer as well. I won't splatter this one because I'm going to show you how to cut that out, but I definitely would splatter that if I was leaving it whole. You can also, if you want to as well, clean off your brush a little bit, maybe water down a bit of that blue. Pick some of this up with your brush, and you can add, if you're going for that arty kind of effect, why not add some brush strokes in here as well, and it really make it look a little bit more arty, almost like it's a bit painted or something. So you can do like whatever, sorry that was a bit off camera, but you can do like whatever you feel is working for your card, and you can you know, hide different areas as well. You don't have to, you know, if you don't like the little crack that's in there, you could have die cut a butterfly and put it over the top. You could have a flower poking in from the side. You could put one of the other decorative panels over there. You could use that place to hide your sentiment, or to add your sentiment, to hide whatever's underneath. So let me just get a little bit of the green as well. I'm going to do a little bit of the painting with the green, I think. If we add some bolder strokes there. So this might not be for everybody, and I'm kind of looking at it thinking maybe I've ruined it, but you know, it's just a different kind of technique that you might want to try, adding in some of these bold sort of brush strokes in here, maybe different directions. It just gives it slightly more of an arty kind of feel. You know, if you feel like it's looking a bit messy, just go for that arty kind of look, and you know, bring your paintbrush in. And then I think this one with that back over the top is going to look brilliant. So I will finish that one off, and you'll have seen the finished version in yesterday's up close video, because I filmed these in the wrong order so I can show the cards in yesterday's video. But yeah, you'll see that finished off in yesterday's video. And then for this one, I'll just clean this up and then I'll come back. I was just thinking as well, because we're using embellishment mousses here, there's nothing to stop you from doing this onto black card too, and then you'd get like the striking effects of the embellishment mousse onto black card too. But I wanted to show you actually, instead of just cutting this, because we're going for that vintage, messy kind of a look with it, why not rip the edges of it and see what that kind of looks like? And if you don't like it, then you can just cut it straight with the trimmer afterwards. If we go a little bit outside of that outer deboss line and just tear along, we can actually get ourselves a different look again. And that's why I was adding in that tulle to those previous cards, because I felt like we're going for that vintagey kind of look, and it just sort of like breaks it up a little bit, or adds a little bit of a messy, wacky kind of element to it, having that little bit of something in the background. You could also, you know, pull some of the threads out of a bit of muslin or cheesecloth or something and have that on there as well. But I think that looks really nice with that torn edge. And then just having that, maybe add it with a bit of 3D foam and put that on a new white card. Then you don't have those funny creases down the side where the dye has pressed into the cardstock, and you've still got a beautiful little sort of panel piece here. And actually, now that has dried off a little bit, we can buff this with our kitchen roll. It doesn't always make that much of a difference, but sometimes it does sort of help meld everything together. So then we've got our beautiful, almost like a vintage ceiling tile or something, but you've got the gorgeous word love in the centre. And because we went for the deeper emboss, and because these are actually embossing dies rather than just normal dies, we have still got some of that white left on there as well. But if you didn't like that, then you can definitely just be heavier handed with your mousse and get it into all of those details, or you can add your mousse first and then deboss your dies into it as well. So I will have finished off these cards that I've been showing you in this tutorial video, and you will have seen them in yesterday's up close video. So we've got those two that we did in the video, plus you know, showing you the difference between using your green tan matte or green or tan matte. I keep calling it tan matte because it's always been a tan colour, but the green matte from the Tangerine or a tan matte from a different machine, or just using a piece of Greyboard, and the Tonic Greyboard is great for this as well, to deboss your dies into your pieces of cardstock. And this can just be as it is, especially if you're doing the subtler deboss into the cardstock. It looks lovely just as it is, just as a white detail in the background, just to add a little bit of something behind another detail. So you can do that. You can also, if you're going with the heavier deboss, you can get that quilted kind of look by colouring, and then you've got that sort of pushed up detail coming through another one that you've added over the top. And it doesn't have to be colouring with alcohol pens, it can be colouring with coloured pencils if you wanted to, watercolours, your mousse even. Water down those mousses and paint it in rather than adding it in messily. You can get more of a precise look like this even with your mousses, whereas this one we went really messy and painterly, but we can still add that one over the top and it will look more cohesive and sort of brought together and a little bit neater as well. And I'll probably finish some of these cards off with a Dymo label as a sentiment as well, but you would have seen that yesterday. But I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video showing you how to deboss your dies, mostly using the Tangerine and 300 GSM white cardstock, but you can play around and alter the sandwich to whatever machine that you have and whatever cardstock you want to use as well. Showing you different ideas of how you can deboss your dies subtly or really deeply. You can add another die cut back over the top, you can use your alcohol pens, you can use your tonic mousses, whatever you want to do. I'm sure there is some way of doing it with this debossing die technique, and obviously you can use any patterned die that you have. You can definitely just use nesting dies as well. I used to do it a lot actually for magazine commissions when I was using like a magazine freebie or something, and that I wanted something to fill the rest of the card but there wasn't really anything included in the set that I could use to do that. I'd take nesting dies and just deboss them, even a couple together, just to create like a frame around the edge of the card, and then put all of the focal elements in the middle. So do think of all of the different dies that you have and try it out with this kind of technique, because I think it's a really, really great one. And I've been doing this tutorial in conjunction with Tonic Showcase number 36, which is the ribbon and key gift box, which will have had an up-close video for it yesterday as well. So if you want to get hold of Tonic Showcase 36, there will be affiliate links in the description box below the video and on my blog post as well. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to use those links. It really does make a difference, and it's very much appreciated. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.